I ignored Navy protocol in a squall to save them, only later learned their last name. My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and by the age of 28, I had already built a respectable career in the United States. I grew up in a small coastal town in Maine, where the sea was always more than a landscape. It was a calling. My father, a Navy veteran, told me stories of the great ships and missions around the world, planting in me the seed of what would become my calling. I graduated with honors from the Annapolis Naval Academy, and after serving in various positions, was promoted to lieutenant and assigned as navigating officer of the USS Leviathan, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. It was a prestigious and responsible position for someone my age, but I had demonstrated exceptional aptitude for navigation and decision-making under pressure. In the fall of 2024, we were conducting routine exercises in the Pacific, approximately 200 nautical miles off the coast of Guam. The weather was perfect. That morning, clear skies, calm seas, and excellent visibility. Our commanding officer, Captain James Reynolds, had just received orders to change course, diverting us to a joint exercise with the Japanese Navy. As the navigation officer, I was on the bridge working on the new route calculation when the ship's meteorologist walked in with a worried expression. "Lieutenant Mitchell, there's a depression forming southwest of our position. We've been monitoring it, but it's accelerated dramatically. In the last hour, I scanned the weather data on my screen. What had started as a run-of-the-mill tropical disturbance was quickly turning into something more serious. Barometric pressure readings were plummeting. Notify the captain," I ordered. "We need to adjust our course immediately." Captain Reynolds arrived on the bridge minutes later, studying the same readings as I was. "Mitchell, what is your assessment?" "Sir, I suggest we divert northeast. We can bypass the system and still reach the rendezvous point with minimal delay." Ehlers agreed, and we quickly adjusted our course. But nature has its own plans, and 3 hours later, it became clear that the storm had intensified beyond initial forecasts. What had begun as a tropical downpour was now approaching typhoon status. Our diversion wouldn't be enough. All teams on high alert. Reynolds ordered over the intercom system, "Prepare the ship for extreme conditions." As the crew moved with practiced efficiency, I received an emergency transmission. I adjusted the volume, listening intently through the growing static. "Mayday, mayday. This is the sailboat Horizon's promise. Approximate position 12 degrees north, 145 east. We are experiencing severe conditions, have lost the main mast, and are taking on water. 3 people on board. We need immediate assistance." I wrote down the coordinates and quickly entered them into the navigation system. They were less than 30 miles from our position, directly in the storm path. "Captain, we have a mayday. Civilian sailboat with people, structural damage, taking on water." Reynolds studied the map where I had marked the sailboats. "That would put us directly in the path of the storm, Mitchell." "Yes, sir." He took a deep breath. "According to protocol, we should alert the Rescue Coordination Center. Under these conditions, sending a helicopter would be unwise, and diverting the Leviathan to that position would put the ship and its entire crew at unnecessary risk." I knew the protocol. He was right. But something inside me rebelled against the coldness of that logic. "Sir, with all due respect, until a rescue can be organized, that sailboat and its crew will likely be gone." Reynolds studied me for a long moment. "Your risk analysis, Lieutenant? We have one of the best destroyers in the fleet. We can handle Category 3C, maybe even Category 4. That sailboat wasn't designed for anything other than Category 1. Reynolds walked to the bridge window, looking out at the horizon where dark clouds were already gathering. "The protocol exists for a reason, Mitchell. Risking a U.S. Navy warship and its 300 crew members to save 3 civilians who chose to sail in storm-warned waters... They may not have received the warning in time, sir." The storm intensified much faster than predicted. Another senior officer, Commander Davis, approached. "Captain, I just checked the storm's course. It's moving northeast at 22 knots. If we attempt rescue, we have at most an hour before we encounter the worst of the storm." Reynolds shook his head. "Too risky. Let's alert the rescue center and continue our detour." I should have agreed. It was the correct decision according to the textbooks. But something about that distress call, the desperate voice, the thought of those 3 lives about to be swallowed by the ocean. "Sir," I said, more firmly than I intended, I request permission to lead a rescue mission." The captain turned, surprised by my insistence. "Denied, Lieutenant. The discussion is closed." He was right, but I couldn't accept it. At that moment, I made the decision that would change the course of my life. "Sir, I am the navigation officer. I can plot a course that will allow us to reach the sailboat, perform the rescue, and still get out of the danger zone before the storm reaches its full strength." "What if you're wrong?" "Then the responsibility will be entirely mine," Davis interjected. "Captain, Lieutenant Mitchell has the best sailing record in the If anyone can do it, she can." Reynolds looked back and forth between us, visibly torn. Finally, against all protocol, he nodded. "You have 45 minutes, Mitchell. Not a second more. And I want a detailed plan in 5 minutes." "Yes, sir." As I plotted the new course, my heart pounded. I had pressured my commander into making a risky decision. If something went wrong, it wouldn't just be my career at stake. It would be hundreds of lives. The sea began to grow rough as we approached the sailboat's position. The sky darkened, turning midday into twilight. 10-foot waves crashed against the Leviathan's hull, but our vessel, designed to withstand the harshest conditions, held steady. "Looking at the sailboat," shouted one of the sailors on deck. "2 points to starboard, 800 meters." Through the binoculars, I spotted Horizon's promise. The mainmast had snapped, and the sailboat was visibly listing. Even from this distance, I could see 3 figures clinging to what remained of the deck, waves crashing over them every few seconds. "Get the rescue team ready. Inflatable boats are not an option in these conditions. We're going to use the helicopter." "Lieutenant," interrupted the aviation officer, "the wind is 50 knots gusting to 70. That's beyond the safe limits for helicopter operation." I glanced at my watch. We had less than 30 minutes before the storm made any rescue impossible. "We need to get closer," I decided. "Close to 100 meters and use line gun." The maneuver I was suggesting was extremely dangerous. Bringing a 9,000-ton destroyer within 100 meters of a sailboat in rough was like trying to park a truck next to a bicycle during an earthquake. "Mitchell," Captain Reynolds spoke quietly beside me. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely, sir." He nodded. "Full power to maneuvering engine. Controlled approach. 100 meters starboard of target." The crew responded with military precision. The massive ship began to move sideways toward the small sailboat. The waves were now 5 meters high, tossing the sailboat up and down like a toy. "Line guns ready," shouted the head of the rescue team. "Wait for my command," I replied, watching the wave pattern. We needed to synchronize the shot with the movement of the sea. The wind howled around the boardwalk, and the rain was now falling horizontally, further reducing visibility. "Now," I ordered as the sailboat crested a wave. The line. Guns fired, sending thick cables hurtling through the stormy air. 2 missed, but the third connected with what remained of the sailboat's frame. "Initiate controlled approach procedure." Slowly, we began closing the distance, pulling the sailboat closer. That's when I saw the 3 survivors clearly for the first time, 2 women and a man, all wearing soaked life jackets, clinging desperately to the wreckage of the sailboat. When they reached 50 meters, our rescue team deployed a special raft attached to a cable. The idea was that survivors could board the raft and be pulled ashore to the Leviathan. "It's not working," shouted one of the sailors. "They're too weak to reach the raft." I glanced at my watch. 20 minutes. The storm was getting worse by the second. Small pieces of debris were now flying through the air. It was then that I made the second decision that defied all protocol that day. "Prepare rescue dive team." The executive officer looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "Mitchell, you can't be suggesting we send swimmers in these conditions." "I'm not suggesting sending anyone," I replied, removing my coat. "I'll go myself." "Lieutenant, this is madness," Davis exclaimed. Captain Reynolds grabbed my arm. "Mitchell, you're the navigation officer. You can't abandon your post during an emergency." "With all due respect, sir, at this time, those 3 people are the emergency. Captain Davis can take over navigation." Reynolds studied me again, his face a mask of conflict between duty and humanity. "You understand that this is insubordination? That you're violating at least 6 regulations?" "Yes, sir. I am fully aware." After what seemed like an eternity, he released my arm. "Equip Lieutenant Mitchell with rescue diving gear." Now, within minutes, I was below deck, donning a reinforced wetsuit, flotation devices, and a lifeline around my waist. The sea looked even fiercer from below, massive waves crashing against the Leviathan's hull. "You have 10 minutes to get them back," the rescue team leaders shouted, and after that, "we'll pull you back, with or without them." I nodded, adjusting my mask. At the last moment, I handed him my watch and identification. "If I don't come back, ... double quotes, you will return, Lieutenant," he stated with conviction. And then I jumped. The impact with the water was like hitting a concrete wall. Immediately, the current tried to drag me away from the ship. My lifeline stretched to its maximum, and for a terrifying moment, I thought it would snap, but it held. Swimming with all my might, I began to approach the sailboat. Each stroke was a battle against the raw power of the raging ocean. Waves crashed overhead, and I frequently lost sight of my goal as I fell into the troughs between the waves. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the capsized hull of the Horizon's Promise. The 3 survivors were clinging to a piece of the cabin that still remained above water. "United States Navy," I shouted. Above the roar of the storm, "I've come to get you out of here." The younger woman was clearly suffering from hypothermia. The man, who appeared to be the strongest of the 3, held her with one arm while clinging to the structure with the other. "Her first," he shouted as I approached. I nodded and showed her the rescue harness I'd brought. "We need to put this on her." Together, we managed to get the young woman into the harness. I signaled the ship's crew, and they began pulling. I watched as she was lifted from the turbulent water, swaying dangerously in the gusts of wind, but finally reaching the relative safety of the Leviathan's deck. The other woman was next. She looked to be in her 50s and was visibly exhausted, but still conscious. "I won't leave you," she yelled at the man when I tried to put the harness on her. "Go, Catherine," he insisted. "There's no time." Something in their interaction told me they were husband and wife. After further argument, she finally allowed me to help her with the harness, and soon she, too, was being pulled onto the ship. Now it was the man's turn. But as I approached with the last harness, a monstrous wave hit the sailboat, separating us. When I surfaced, I saw with horror that he had been swept away from the boat, clinging only to a piece of wreckage. My safety line wouldn't allow me to reach him. Without a second thought, I opened the clasp. It was a direct violation of rescue protocol. No rescuer should ever disconnect from their lifeline, but there was no alternative. I let go of the line and swam with all my might toward the man. By the time I reached him, he was clearly on the verge of exhaustion. "Take this," I yelled, offering the harness. "Put it on." "I can't ... double quotes, he murmured, his strength fading. "Yes, you can," I insisted, helping him put on the gear with trembling hands. "Your family needs you." This mention seemed to give him renewed strength. With a combined effort, we managed to put on the harness. I gave the final signal to the rescue team, and they began to pull him in. It was at that moment that I realized my fatal mistake. I had disconnected from my safety line and used the last harness for the man. There was no way I could return to the ship. As the man was pulled to safety, I clung to a piece of wreckage, trying to keep my head above water. The waves were now at least 7 meters high, and the wind howled at over 80 knots. I was in the middle of a typhoon with no lifeline, no means of rescue. The Leviathan loomed large before me, yet unattainable like a distant mountain. I watched the man being pulled onto the deck, and for a moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. 3 lives saved. It was worth it. Then, to my surprise, I saw something fall from the ship. Other harness attached to a new line. Someone on the rescue team had improvised, violating probably a dozen other protocols. Gathering my last strength, I swam toward the harness. The waves continued to toss me up and down, pushing me further away from my goal with each passing. My muscles screamed with exhaustion, and the cold began to numb my limbs. After several failed attempts, I finally grabbed the harness. With numb fingers, I managed to loop it over my shoulders and give the signal. The sensation of being pulled out of that watery hell was indescribable. Swinging violently in the air, I was lifted above the raging waves, the wind threatening to hurl me against the hull of the ship at any moment. When they finally pulled me onto the deck, collapsing soaked onto the cold metal, I glanced at the nearby wall clock. The entire rescue had taken 17 minutes, well within the 20 we'd calculated as our safety window. "All hands on deck," someone shouted. "Stay clear of the storm. Full power." I felt hands helping me up, guiding me inside. Someone threw a thermal blanket over my shoulders, and someone else pushed a mug of something warm into my hands. As they led me away from the deck, I caught one last glimpse of the small sailboat, now just a tiny speck in the gray expanse, before it was completely swallowed by a gigantic wave. I was taken to the infirmary, where the 3 survivors were treated. The young woman had regained consciousness and was wrapped in blankets, shaking violently. The older woman sat beside her, holding her. The man, still wet and exhausted, stood up when he saw me enter. "You ... double quotes," he began, his voice breaking. "You risked your life for us." I shook my head, dismissing the gesture. "Just doing my job, sir." "No," he insisted, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "You let go. I saw it. You could have died." I didn't know what to say. Technically, he was right. I had violated protocol, disobeyed indirect orders, and put myself and potentially the ship at risk. "What's your name, officer?" asked the older woman. "Lieutenant Alexandra Mitchell, ma'am. Navigating officer of the USS Leviathan." "Mitchell ... she repeated slowly. "I'll never forget that name." The ship's doctor interrupted, insisting that I also needed treatment for mild hypothermia. As they moved me to another bed, the man called out, "Lieutenant Mitchell, thank you for saving my family. My name is Daniel Pierce." At that moment, the name meant nothing to me. I was too exhausted to think clearly. I just nodded and allowed the doctor to examine me. A few hours later, when the storm had left us behind and the Leviathan was sailing in calmer seas, I was summoned to Captain Reynolds' office. I knew what was coming. A formal reprimand, possibly even a court-martial for insubordination and breach of protocol. My Navy career had likely ended that day. I knocked on the door and entered when authorized. To my surprise, Reynolds wasn't alone. Commander Davis and the executive officer were also present, their faces unreadable. "Lieutenant Mitchell," Reynolds began, his voice neutral. "Do you understand the gravity of your actions today?" "Yes, sir," I replied, standing at attention. "You disobeyed direct orders, endangered a United States Navy vessel and its crew, and violated at least 12 safety and operational protocol." "Yes, sir." He got up from his chair, walking until he was standing directly in front of me. "Under normal circumstances, your actions would result in an immediate court-martial and likely the end of your military." I swallowed hard, keeping my gaze fixed straight ahead. "However," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "today's circumstances were far from normal." He exchanged glances with the other officers because of your, shall we say, creative interpretation of the protocols. 3 American civilians are alive tonight, and you risked your own life in a way few would have the courage to do." He paused. "Officially, I'm placing a formal warning in your file. Unofficially, ... double quotes." He held out his hand. ... Good work, Mitchell." Blinking in confusion, I shook his outstretched hand. "The survivors are in stable condition," Commander Davis reported. "They will be transferred to a hospital in Guam upon our docking tomorrow." "Thank you, sir," I replied, still a little dazed by the unexpected turn of the conversation. "Do you have any idea who you saved today, Mitchell?" Reynolds asked. "Just 3 civilians, sir. A man named Daniel Pierce and his family." The 3 officers exchanged meaningful glances. "Daniel Pierce," Reynolds repeated slowly. "Admiral Daniel Pierce, former commander of the 6th Fleet and current Undersecretary of the Navy." I felt my stomach sink. I had risked everything to save one of the most senior officers in the U.S. Navy, someone I should have recognized immediately. "I didn't know, sir." "Obviously," Reynolds almost smiled. "And something tells me that even if he had known, his actions would have been exactly the same." "Yes, sir. Rest easy, Mitchell. You earned this." "Thank you, sir." As I turned to leave, Reynolds added, "Oh, and Admiral Pierce requested a word with you when you're feeling better. Apparently, he has a lot to say about officers who ignore protocol to do the right thing." We docked in Guam the next morning, under clear skies that gave no hint of the previous day's raging storm. The 3 survivors were transferred to the Naval Hospital. Before departing, Admiral Pierce requested my presence. I found him sitting in a wheelchair in the infirmary, looking much more imposing than when I'd pulled him from the turbulent waters. His wife, Catherine, was at his side, and the young woman, who I now knew to be his daughter, Emily, lay on a nearby stretcher. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said as I approached, "I finally have a chance to thank you properly." "No need, sir." "I strongly disagree." He gestured for me to sit down. "You know, I spent 40 years in the Navy. I helped write some of those protocols you so spectacularly ignored yesterday." I felt my face flush. "Sir," he held up his hand, interrupting. "Protocols exist for a reason. They save lives. They establish order in chaos. They allow men and women to make difficult decisions in impossible circumstances." I nodded, bracing myself for the reprimand that was sure to come. "But," he continued, his voice softening, "the best officers I've ever known know when protocols should be followed, and when they should be broken." Catherine put her hand on his shoulder. "What Daniel is trying to say, in his typically verbose way, is thank you. You saved our lives." Emily, from the stretcher, added, "You were amazing. Like a superhero or something." I smiled shyly. "Just doing my job." "No," Admiral Pierce insisted. "You went far beyond the call of duty. And believe me, I know it when I see it." He exchanged a look with his wife before continuing. "Do you know why we were on that sailboat? It was our 30th anniversary. Catherine had always wanted to sail the Pacific, and after 4 decades of serving in the Navy, I finally decided to do something special for her. It was my idea to bring Emily on board too," Catherine added. "She just graduated with a degree in oceanography." "The irony is not lost on me," the Admiral continued. 40 years in the Navy without a scratch, only to nearly die on a sailing vacation." I smiled. "Life has these things, sir." "It certainly does." He studied me for a moment. "I've heard of your record, Lieutenant Mitchell. Impressive, to say the least. First in your class in tactical navigation, exceptional commendations, and now, well, now you have the Undersecretary of the Navy in your debt. It's really not necessary. My daughter is alive because he interrupted firmly. "My wife is alive. I am alive. So, yes, it is absolutely necessary." He held out his hand, offering a small metal object. It was a lapel pin bearing the symbol of the Undersecretary of the Navy. "This isn't official, understand, but I want you to know that you have a friend in Washington, and when you're ready for the next step in your career, I hope you'll allow me to help." I accepted the brooch, not knowing what to say. "Thank you, sir." "No, Alexandra," he said, using my first name for the first time. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, life returned to normal as it could be. The USS Leviathan completed its exercises with the Japanese Navy and moved on to other missions. The formal warning in my file was noted, but it paled in comparison to the letters of commendation that Captain Reynolds and, surprisingly, Admiral Pierce had enclosed. The pin remained on my dress uniform, a small reminder of the day I chose to ignore protocol and follow my conscience. 6 months later, I received new orders. I was being transferred to the Pentagon, designated as Special Advisor for Naval Operations, an extraordinary promotion for someone with my seniority. The official letter was accompanied by a small personal card, signed simply, "Welcome to Washington, Pierce." When I arrived at the Pentagon for my first day, I was greeted by an assistant who led me directly to the Undersecretary's office. Admiral Pierce, now without his wheelchair, and looking much more like the high-ranking officer he once was, stood to greet me. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he smiled, noticing my new insignia. "Welcome to your new assignment." "Thank you, sir." "I'm still a little surprised by all this." "You shouldn't be. You earned it on merit." He gestured for me to sit down. "You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that day in the storm." "Me too." "Sir, when you jumped into that water to save us, you had no idea who we were. To you, we were just 3 lives that needed saving, no matter the personal cost. Anyone would have done the same." "No." He shook his head emphatically. "Not everyone would. That's why you're here now." He slid a folder across the table toward me. "I'm setting up a special task force. Officially, it's an initiative to review and update rescue protocols in extreme condition." I opened the folder, examining the documents inside. "And unofficially?" I asked. A slow smile spread across the Admiral's face. "Unofficially, we're trying to identify and cultivate a new kind of officer. One who understands that sometimes the greatest loyalty to duty comes from knowing when to break the rules." He leaned back in his chair. "The world is changing, Commander. We face threats and challenges that, didn't exist when many of our protocols were written. We need leaders who can think outside the box when necessary. I closed the folder, feeling the weight of the opportunity and the responsibility he was offering me. Why me, sir? Surely there are more experienced officers. Experience is not what we're looking for. We're looking for courage, judgment, the ability to make the right decision, even when it's the hard one. He pointed to the pin on my uniform. You demonstrated all of these qualities that day. And most importantly, you demonstrated them not because you knew who I was, but in spite of not knowing. I remained silent, absorbing his words. So, Commander Mitchell, he continued, are you ready to help shape the future of the American Navy? I thought of the destroyer facing the storm, the shattered sailboat, the lives at stake. I thought of the rules I broke and the ones I followed. And you undoubtedly knew my answer. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Admiral Pierce smiled, not the formal smile of a superior officer, but the genuine smile of a man whose life I had saved. Excellent. Welcome to the Horizon Initiative, Commander Mitchell. As he explained the details of the task force to me, I couldn't help but reflect on how one decision to ignore protocol during a storm had changed the course of my life. I didn't know then that I had saved the Undersecretary of the Navy. I didn't know that his last name, Pierce, would one day be so important to me. All I knew in that stormy moment was that there were lives to save, and that some rules, no matter how important, sometimes needed to be broken for the greater good. When I left the Admiral's office that day, carrying the briefcase with my new mission, I felt a certainty I had rarely experienced before. Sometimes, true heroism lies not in following the right path, but in forging a new one when necessary. And what about Admiral Pierce and his family? They became more than just names on my service record. They became friends, mentors, an extension of my own family. Emily, now fully recovered, frequently consulted me about her own aspirations to join the Navy as a science officer. Catherine invited me to dinner whenever I was in Washington, treating me like the daughter who saved her family. And the Admiral? He became the mentor I never knew I needed, someone who understood the delicate balance between duty and conscience, between following orders and following your heart. My name is Alexandra Mitchell. I'm a lieutenant commander in the United States, and in a raging storm in the Pacific, I learned that sometimes you have to break the rules to do the right thing. And what about the Pierce surname? Well, that's another story for another day. For now, suffice it to say that wearing the Undersecretary is just the beginning of a journey that began on that stormy day when I chose to put lives above protocol. Because in the end, it's not names, patents, or protocols that define who we are. It's the choices we make when everything is at stake. As Admiral Pierce often says in our task force meetings, protocols are written in ink. Courage is written in action. And it's that lesson more than any other that I carry with me every day as I help shape the future of the institution I love, inspiring the next generation of officers to find that perfect balance between following the rules and knowing when to break them. Because sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when duty demands not just obedience, but the courage to do what's right, no matter the cost. This is the true essence of leadership, and of life, that I discovered in that storm. When I jumped into the turbulent waters without knowing who I was saving, only that they needed saving. And in the end, that's the story that really matters. The Horizon Initiative proved to be far broader and more ambitious than I could have initially imagined. In my first months at the Pentagon, I discovered that Admiral Pierce had assembled an eclectic group of officers, all with stories similar to mine. People who, at some critical juncture, had demonstrated the ability to think beyond established protocols. Our initial team consisted of 8 officers, including myself. There was Richard Dawson, a SEAL commander who had disobeyed direct orders to rescue hostages in an operation off the east coast of Africa. Elena Rodriguez, a communications specialist who developed an unauthorized system during a complete blackout, saving a besieged American embassy. James Wong, a naval medic who performed an experimental procedure in the open field when all conventional options had failed. Each of us carried a formal warning in our files, and each of us had saved lives by making the difficult decision, the decision no manual could have predicted. You're not here because of your mistakes. Admiral Pierce explained during our first team meeting. "You're here because of your successes. Those times when you trusted your instincts and judgment over standard procedures." Our first task was to analyze naval incidents from the past 20 years, situations where strict adherence to protocols had resulted in unnecessary losses, and cases where breaking them had saved lives. The pattern that emerged was fascinating. It wasn't simply a matter of following or not following the rules. It was about understanding the spirit behind them and recognizing when the letter of the law no longer served its original purpose. During this time, I continued to receive letters from the Pierce family. Emily had decided to pursue a career in the Navy and was preparing for the Naval Academy exam. Catherine frequently invited me to dinners, treating me like family. These moments reminded me why our work mattered. It wasn't just statistics and analysis, but real people whose lives depended on the decisions we made. On one particularly memorable evening, after dinner at the Pierce residence, the Admiral invited me to his private office. "I have something to show you," he said, opening a safe built into the wall. From inside, he removed a medal I recognized immediately, the Navy Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor in recognizing valor in combat. "That was given to my father," he explained. "World War II. He was a young lieutenant commanding a torpedo boat in the Pacific." I examined the medal reverently. The Admiral rarely spoke about his family. During a reconnaissance mission, he spotted a Japanese destroyer. The protocols were clear: report and retreat. Attacking would be suicide for such a small vessel. But he attacked, I guess. Pierce smiled. Yes. He realized the destroyer was heading toward an evacuation route where several American hospital ships would be passing. He ignored protocol, launched all his torpedoes, and managed to damage the destroyer enough to delay it. Did he survive? Close call. Lost half his crew. But those hospital ships, with nearly 2,000 wounded on board, arrived safely. He put the medal back in the safe. "When you pulled me out of that ocean, I saw the same kind of courage my father displayed." His words touched me deeply. "Thank you for sharing this, sir. This isn't just a bureaucratic initiative, Alexandra. It's a legacy. We're trying to institutionalize something that's always existed in the best officers: the ability to balance rules with wisdom." 6 months after the Horizon Initiative began, we received our first real mission. An American research vessel had been damaged by a storm in the Bering Sea and was adrift in disputed international waters. The situation was delicate. Protocol dictated waiting for diplomatic clearance before entering those waters, a process that could take days. 17 scientists on board. Admiral Pierce reported during our emergency briefing. Oxygen reserves for 36 hours. Water temperature at 2 degrees Celsius. If we follow protocol, ... they'll be dead before we get permission, Alina finished. Exactly. This is the first real test of the Horizon Initiative. We need a solution that balances our diplomatic obligations with the need to save these lives. We worked tirelessly for 24 hours, developing a strategy that had never been attempted before. We would send a small, civilian-flagged vessel, technically a humanitarian assistance vessel, while keeping a Navy ship waiting right at the border of the disputed waters. "It's a gray area," James admitted. "We're technically respecting diplomatic protocol, but ... double quotes. But we are finding a way to fulfill our primary mission, saving lives," I added. The plan was approved directly by the Secretary of the Navy, with the stipulation that we would assume full responsibility if it failed. I followed the operation from the Pentagon's control room, monitoring every detail as our team navigated those dangerous waters. When they finally reached the drifting ship and began the evacuation, I could see the slight smile on Admiral Pierce's face. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. The success of that mission established the Horizon Initiative as an innovative force within the Navy. In the following weeks, we were officially tasked with reviewing and modernizing the Navy's rescue protocols, not to eliminate them, but to make them more adaptable, to incorporate a judgment clause that would allow flexibility in extreme situations. The following spring, I received surprising news. I was being promoted to commander, an extraordinarily rapid rise that generated some murmuring in the corridors of the Pentagon. Some said it was Admiral Pierce's favoritism. Others suggested I had bought my promotion with that rescue in the Pacific. "Ignore them," Alina advised over lunch. "We all face it. part of the job and horizon. Still, I don't want you to think I'm here just because I saved the right family. That's not why you're here, she insisted. You're here because, when faced with an impossible choice, you chose the lives in front of you over your own safety. That's rare, Alexandra. Rarer than you know. The promotion ceremony was held at the Pentagon itself, with Admiral Pierce presiding. Emily and Catherine were in attendance, applauding as enthusiastically as my own mother, who had traveled from Maine for the Commander Mitchell, the Admiral declared as he pinned my new insignia. You exemplify the best of the American naval tradition, courage, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to the lives under your protection. After the ceremony, my mother approached the Admiral and introduced herself. To my surprise, they fell into an easy and lively conversation. Your father would be so proud. He always said you had more courage than sense. He was probably right, I laughed, remembering my father, who had passed away while I was still at the academy. Daniel Admiral Pierce told me about the rescue. Not the official details, but how you jumped into that water. Without hesitation, she took my hand. That's pure Thomas Mitchell. Your father would do exactly the same. Those words meant more to me than the promotion. My father had served as a common seaman, never achieving the rank of officer, but his devotion to duty had inspired my own career. With my new rank came greater responsibility within the initiative. Admiral Pierce assigned me to lead a subdivision focused specifically on rescue operations in hostile environments, both environmentally and politically. We worked directly with the SEALs, the Coast Guard, and even civilian agencies to develop new protocols and technology. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in my office, I received an unexpected visit. Emily Pierce, now a cadet in her first year at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Commander Mitchell, she smiled, giving a formal salute which I returned. Cadet Pierce. This is a pleasant surprise. She looked very different from the semi-conscious young woman I had helped rescue from that storm. Now, she wore her academy uniform with evident pride, her bearing already showing military discipline. I'm in Washington for the weekend, she explained, and I wanted to ask you a question. In person. Sure, I replied, offering him a chair. How can I help? Emily hesitated, unusual for the confident young woman I had met at Pierce's family dinners. At the academy, everyone knows the story. The undersecretary's rescue by a young officer who ignored protocol. She met my gaze. Some of the instructors use you as an example of why protocols are important. They say you were lucky, that it could have cost the entire crew their lives. I wasn't surprised. The Navy, like any institution, resisted change. For many traditional officers, my rescue represented exactly the kind of recklessness the protocols were meant to prevent. And others, Emily continued, use you as an example of true leadership, knowing when the rules need to be adapted. And what do you think? I asked softly. I was there, she replied simply. I know we would be dead if you had followed protocol. I nodded slowly. What do you want to know, Emily? How did you know? At that moment, how were you sure you were doing the right thing? It was a profound question, one I had contemplated many times since that day. I wasn't sure, I confessed. No one ever is, in moments like these. But I realized the protocol had been written for a specific set of circumstances, and we were facing something different. The ultimate goal, protecting lives, was more important than the specific procedure. Emily absorbed my words in silence. There's something else, she said finally. I'm thinking of specializing in rescue operations, like you. I smiled, genuinely touched. It would be an honor to have you follow this path. My father doesn't know yet. He expects me to go to strategic command, like him. The Admiral respects your independence, I assured him. He may be surprised at first, but I'm sure he'll support your decision. As Emily left, I reflected on how that storm had intertwined our lives in ways I never could have. From the navigation officer who risked everything to save 3 strangers, I had become a mentor to the next generation. The following summer, the Horizon Initiative faced its greatest challenge yet. An American nuclear submarine had suffered a catastrophic propulsion failure and was trapped at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean beneath a thick, Layer of ice, 137 crew members, oxygen for approximately 72 hours, and no existing protocol for dealing with such an extreme situation. Current protocols would require us to send a rescue submarine through a channel cut in the ice, I explained during our emergency. But we don't have time to cut a channel large enough, and we can't just break through the ice from above, Richard added. The pressure could further damage the submarine. Admiral Pierce watched as we presented options, each one riskier than the last. Finally, I proposed an idea that seemed nearly impossible, using a smaller submarine. Not designed for rescue operation, equipped with an experimental docking device our engineers had been developing. It's never been tested in real conditions, I warned, and we'd need a captain willing to navigate under the ice. Without standard safety systems, it's suicide, argued one of the admirals present at the meeting. It's their only chance, I countered. After hours of heated debate, Admiral Pierce made his decision. We'll try Commander Mitchell's plan, he declared. But I need an officer to lead the mission, someone who fully understands the risks and is still willing to proceed. Before he could continue, I stepped forward. I will, sir. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Pierce spoke. You are the architect of this plan, Commander. Your presence here coordinating would be most valuable. With all due respect, sir, I understand better than anyone what we are proposing, and I would not ask anyone to take a risk that I myself would not be willing to take. Our eyes met, and I saw a mixture of pride and concern in him, not just as my superior, but as someone who cared. Very well, Commander Mitchell. The mission is yours. Over the next 24 hours, I was transported to northern Alaska, where the USS Barracuda, a small attack submarine, was being hastily retrofitted with our experimental device. Her crew, all volunteers, greeted me with a quiet respect that spoke louder than words. No guarantees, folks, I said frankly during our briefing. We're writing the manual as we go. We've been in worse situations, Commander, replied the Barracuda's captain, a veteran of 3 decades of service. Well, maybe not worse, but we like to think so. The descent beneath the Arctic ice was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The oppressive silence, interrupted only by the mechanical sounds of the submarine and occasional communication, the absolute darkness beyond our lights, the constant awareness that inches of metal were all that separated us from instant death. After 6 hours of precarious navigation, we located the damaged submarine. The real challenge now began attaching our experimental device to a submarine never designed for this type of rescue. Target range, 50 meters, the sonar officer reported. Reduce speed to minimum operating speed, I ordered. Prepare the docking device. The next few minutes were filled with unbearable tension as meticulous maneuvers brought the two vessels closer together. The device, essentially a flexible airlock with a magnetic locking system, was our only hope. Contact in 10 meters, 5 meters, 2 meters, double. Quotes, the soft impact was accompanied by a metallic boom that reverberated throughout the Barracuda. Initial docking successful, the chief engineer announced. Initiating pressurization sequence. The entire crew held their breath as the indicators showed the sealing progress. If it failed now, we could lose both submarines. Sealing complete at 97%, came the report. That's the best we'll get, Commander. 97% will have to be enough, I replied, knowing we were operating far beyond the recommended safety. Initiate evacuation. Over the next 6 hours, we transferred 137 crew members from the damaged submarine to the Barracuda, a vessel designed to accommodate fewer than 80. The conditions were inhumane, oxygen was scarce, and space was virtually non-existent, but everyone was alive. When the last crew member was transferred, I gave the order to undock. What about the classified materials on board? Asked the captain of the rescued submarine. Protocol would require us to destroy the submarine to protect sensitive information, I replied. But that would create an environmental key in this fragile ecosystem. I paused. We'll leave the self-destruct systems disabled. A recovery team can return when conditions permit. It was another direct violation of protocol. But at that moment, protecting the ocean seemed as important as protecting military secrets. The return journey was claustrophobic and tense, with the Barracuda carrying more than twice its designed capacity. Every minute felt like an eternity as we navigated carefully under the ice, our oxygen supplies dangerously low. When we finally emerged into an open channel and the hatch was opened, letting in the frigid Arctic air, never had anything so cold felt so sweet. I returned to Washington a week later as a reluctant hero. The rescue operation had captured the nation's imagination, and the Horizon Initiative was suddenly in the spotlight. Interviews, speaking engagements, even a visit to the White House. It all felt surreal after the tension of those days under the ice. "You understand what happened, don't you?" Admiral Pierce asked during a private meeting in his office. "We made a successful rescue against all odds," I replied, uncertain about his line of questioning. "No," he smiled. "You've changed the Navy, Alexandra. This isn't just our little experimental initiative anymore. What you did, what we all did, is being officially incorporated into naval doctrine." He showed me a new manual, still in draft form. The cover read, "Adaptive Protocols for Operations in Extreme Environments." The first of many, he explained. "We are officially changing the way the Navy approaches critical situations, not abandoning protocols, but evolving them to include what you demonstrated so brilliantly: human judgment, adaptability, courage." It was a moment of profound realization. What had begun as an impulsive act during a storm had transformed into something much bigger, a fundamental shift in the operating philosophy of America's most traditional institution. "And there's more," Pierce continued, handing me an official envelope. "You are being appointed to command the new Adaptive Operations Training Center in San Diego." "Captain Mitchell." I looked at him in shock. "Captain? But it's too early." It's exactly the right time," he replied firmly. "We need you leading the next generation, teaching them what you know instinctively, when to follow the manual and when to write it again." In the months that followed, I moved to San Diego to establish the new training center. It was an unprecedented opportunity to create from scratch a program that would integrate Horizon Initiative principles into standard naval officer training. Emily Pierce, now in her third year at the academy, frequently messaged me asking for career advice. She had, in fact, chosen to specialize in rescue operations, against her father's expectations, but with his full support. "He says you ruined his daughter," she joked in a message. But then he said he couldn't be more proud. The Pierce family had become an extension of my own. Catherine sent packages of homemade cookies regularly, and the Admiral, now simply Daniel, in our private conversations, remained my most trusted mentor and friend. On a sunny October afternoon, exactly 2 years after that fateful rescue in the Pacific, I received a surprise visit in San Diego. Daniel Pierce, in civilian clothes instead of his usual uniform, showed up at the training center unannounced. "Admiral," I greeted, surprised. "We didn't know you were coming to the West Coast this week." "It's not an official visit," he explained. "Actually, I came to tell you in person I'm retiring." The news caught me completely off guard. Daniel Pierce was an institution in the Navy, a visionary leader whose impact would be felt for generations. "Why?" was all I could ask. He smiled, that same smile I'd seen when I'd pulled him from the turbulent waters. 42 years of service is enough, don't you think? And the Horizon Initiative is in good hands now." We walked the grounds of the training center, watching young officers practice exercises. We had developed simulations that tested not only their adherence to protocols, but their ability to adapt when those protocols no longer suited them. "Do you know what Catherine told me after the rescue?" Daniel asked after a long silence. "That young officer has the same look in her eyes as you did when we first met. She saw something in you that I also recognized, that rare combination of discipline and defiance that makes the best leaders. I never considered myself a rebel," I protested softly. "No," he laughed. "You jumped into a raging ocean against orders, Alex. If that's not rebellion, I don't know what is." I smiled, acknowledging the point. "I have one last request before I leave active duty," he continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I want you to consider applying to the Naval Academy as an instructor in a few. We need people like you molding officers from the ground up." The idea surprised me. Teaching at the Academy was an honor normally reserved for much more senior officers. "I'm sure there are more qualified candidates," I argued. "No one is more qualified to teach what really matters: he insisted. Not just navigation or tactic, but judgment, character, the qualities no manual can codify. Before I could respond, he added, "Besides, Emily will be graduating soon. She needs strong mentors as she starts her own career. You know I'll always be there for her," I assured. "I know." He smiled. "Again, just like you were there for all of us in that storm." When we said goodbye that afternoon, it wasn't just a superior saying goodbye to a subordinate. It was a friend, a mentor, almost a second father, passing the baton to the next generation. "Captain Mitchell," he said formally, offering an impeccable salute that I returned. Then, breaking protocol one last time, he hugged me. "Thank you, Alexandra, for everything." In the years that followed, the legacy of the Horizon Initiative grew beyond anything any of us could have imagined. The new adaptive protocols we developed saved countless lives in situations that would previously have been considered impossible to resolve. Emily Pierce graduated with honors and launched her own promising career, often meeting us for dinner when our assignments allowed. Daniel, now officially retired, devoted his time to writing and lecturing on adaptive leadership, often using my story as a central example, something that made me simultaneously proud and embarrassed. As for me, I eventually took Daniel's suggestion and became an instructor at the Naval Academy, teaching a new course called Adaptive Decision-Making in Critical Environment. My students came prepared to learn rules and protocols, and they left understanding that true leadership often resides in the space between the rules. On a rainy spring night, 5 years after that fateful rescue, I received a special package at my academy residence. Inside was a small wooden box, bearing the Navy emblem and a note from Daniel Pierce. "Alexandra, I found this in my father's belonging. I thought it should belong to you now. Some traditions are worth preserving. Some are worth reinventing. You always knew the difference." Daniel inside the box was an antique brass whistle, the kind naval officers used centuries ago to convey orders. Engraved on it was a simple inscription, "For those who know when duty demands courage." That night, standing by the window watching the cadets march through the rain, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that began in that violent storm. How a single moment of decision had altered not only my life, but potentially the future of the institution I loved. I thought of the young officer I had been, scared but determined, jumping into the turbulent waters without knowing who I was saving or what that choice would mean. And I realized that if faced with the same situation again, I would make exactly the same choice. Because in the end, it's not protocols, regulations, or manuals that define an institution like the Navy, it's the people. People willing to risk everything for strangers. People whose names and stories may remain unknown until fate intertwines them in moments of crises. People like me, like Daniel Pierce and his family, like every officer who has ever had to choose between following the rules and following their conscience. The brass whistle now occupies a place of honor in my office at the Academy. A reminder to me and to every incoming cadet that in the Navy, as in life, true north isn't always found in the manual. Sometimes it's found in the heart. And what about the Pierce surname? It still means a lot to me. Not just as the name of the family I saved, but as a symbol of a connection that transcends hierarchy and protocol. A connection forged in the most turbulent waters, one that has stood the test of time and changed the U.S. Navy forever. Because some storms don't come to destroy. They come to clear the way for something new, something better. And that day, when I ignored naval protocol to save 3 strangers, without knowing their names or their meaning, I found not only my purpose, but my true family in the Navy.